The crystal glass rang out. Sharp. Cold. Intentional. It cut through the chatter like a blade, and the dining room instantly fell silent. At the head of the long mahogany table, my father Richard stood up. He didn't look nervous. He looked like a man who had rehearsed this moment for years and was finally ready to enjoy the performance. He smoothed his tie, let his gaze drift over my brothers Tyler and Connor with a warm, indulgent smile, and then he turned to me. His eyes went flat. The estate, the commercial holdings, the entire portfolio, he announced, his voice steady and loud, will pass exclusively to Tyler and Connor. He paused, letting the words settle into the expensive rugs, waiting for the impact. Then he leaned forward, bracing his hands on the table, looking directly into my eyes. Real assets are for the men who built them, Grace. Your science experiments are a hobby. You're out. He smiled then, a small satisfied quirk of the lips. He was waiting for me to cry. He was waiting for the protest, the scene, the explosion of hurt feelings that would confirm everything he thought about me, that I was weak, emotional, and unworthy. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. I just reached for my wine glass, lifted it slowly to my lips, and took a sip. The wine was expensive. It tasted like leverage. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. 3 hours earlier, the sky over the Hudson Valley had been the color of a bruise. I drove a rental sedan, a nondescript silver thing that smelled of industrial cleaner and someone else's coffee. I parked it at the very bottom of the long, winding driveway tucked behind a hedge of overgrown rhododendrons. I didn't want them to see it, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't want to give them any ammunition before I even walked through the door. I walked up the gravel path, the cold air biting at my cheeks. The estate loomed ahead, a massive Victorian pile of stone and ego that smelled of damp leaves and old money. It was beautiful in a way that felt heavy, oppressive. It was the kind of house that demanded you be impressed by it, even if the roof was leaking and the heating bills were 3 months overdue. As I got closer, I saw them. 2 massive black SUVs parked right on the front lawn, their tires digging into the frost-covered grass. They were leased, of course. Everything about my brothers was leased. The cars, the watches, the lifestyle. They were loud vehicles for loud men, parked aggressively as if to say, we own this space. I stopped for a moment, my hand on the cold iron railing of the front steps. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It wasn't a text from a friend or a holiday greeting. It was a notification from my legal team. Patent approval granted. Synthetic myocardial tissue regeneration. The valuation attached to that single email was enough to buy this entire estate 10 times over and burn it to the ground just for the insurance money. But I didn't smile. I swiped the notification away, put the phone back in my pocket, and took a breath. I was walking into the lion's den, but they didn't know I wasn't a mouse anymore. I was the one holding the keys to the zoo. The hallway smelled exactly as I remembered it, floor wax, dust, and a faint, lingering scent of judgment. My mother, Catherine, was waiting by the staircase. She looked tired, her smile tight, and practiced the kind of smile you wear when you're trying to keep a lid on a pot that's boiling over. She hugged me, but it was a limp, careful thing, like she was afraid I might break or worse, stain her blouse. Grace, she said, pulling back to look at me. You made it. Then her eyes did the scan. The up and down sweep that I had dreaded since I was 6 years old. She took in my gray sweater, my simple black trousers, my lack of jewelry. You look comfortable, she said, the word hanging in the air like an insult. We dressed up a bit, you know. It's a holiday. I'm fine, Mom, I said, my voice even. From the living room, a voice boomed out. Tyler. Is that the scientist? He shouted, not bothering to come into the hall. Did you bring your microscope, Gracie? Or are you still working on that invisible boyfriend? Laughter followed. The low, cruel chuckle of my father joining in. I felt my stomach tighten, a physical reaction that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with memory. I excused myself and walked quickly to the guest bathroom, locking the door behind me with a click that sounded too loud in the quiet house. I leaned against the sink, gripping the cold porcelain until my knuckles turned white. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a 32-year-old woman who ran a biotech firm valued in the billions. I saw a CEO who negotiated with government regulators and international investors without flinching. But inside I felt it. The invisible chain. It's a strange thing, isn't it? You can build a skyscraper, but the moment you step back into your childhood home, you're living in the basement again. That wounded child inside doesn't care about your bank account or your accolades. She just wants a seat at the table. She wants them to look at her and see her, not the ghost they've created in their minds. I realized then why I had come back. Why I hadn't just stayed in my penthouse and ignored their calls. I wasn't here for the turkey. I wasn't here for the inheritance I didn't need. I was here because a part of me, the part that was 12 years old and lonely, still thought that if I just achieved enough, if I just became enough, they would finally stop laughing. It was a lie, of course, but it was a powerful one. It was the lie that had driven me to work 18-hour days, to skip vacations, to build an empire in silence. I wanted to be so undeniable that they couldn't look away. I splashed cold water on my face, dried it with a monogrammed towel that scratched my skin, and unlocked the door. I was done being the child. It was time to go to dinner. The dining room was a theater of excess. Crystal goblets, heavy silver cutlery, a centerpiece of autumn flowers that was too tall to see over. Richard sat at the head naturally. Tyler and Connor flanked him like oversized, soft-handed bodyguards. My mother sat at the other end, shrinking into her chair as if trying to disappear. I took the seat in the middle opposite Jacob Tyler's 15-year-old son. Jacob was the only one who didn't look like he was performing. He had his head down, his thumbs moving rapidly over his phone screen under the table, completely checked out. I didn't blame him. So Connor said, leaning back and swirling his wine, "I closed that deal in Tribeca last week. Monster commission. We're talking 6 figures easy." Richard nodded, beaming. "That's my boy. Real estate. That's where the real money is. Bricks and mortar. It's tangible. It's real. Not like, whatever it is you do, Grace." He waved a hand in my direction, a dismissive gesture that swatted away my entire career like a fly. "Synthetic biology, Dad," I said, quietly cutting my steak. "Right," he scoffed. "Playing God. Trying to grow things in test tubes. It's volatile gambling, Grace. It's not a business. It's a science fair project that got out of hand. When are you going to get a real job? I could still find a spot for you in admin. You were always good at filing." Tyler snorted into his wine. "Yeah, Gracie. We need someone to organize the holiday party." I kept eating. I chewed slowly, deliberately. I let the silence stretch, let their words hang in the air, exposing them for exactly what they were. They weren't attacking me because I was failing. They were attacking me because they needed me to be small so they could feel big. The tension in the room was thickening, a physical weight pressing down on the table. Richard opened his mouth to speak again, to deliver another blow, another reminder of my place in the hierarchy. But he never got the chance. Across the table, Jacob gasped. It wasn't a quiet sound. It was a sharp intake of breath that sounded like panic. He dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china. Jacob Tyler snapped. "Get off that phone." "Grandpa, stop," Jacob said, his voice shaking. He looked up, his eyes wide, darting from his phone to me and back again. "You need to see this." He shoved the phone across the table towards Richard. The screen was bright in the dim room. "What is this?" Richard demanded, squinting at the glare. "It's the Forbes list," Jacob whispered. "It just dropped. The real-time update." So Richard said, annoyed. "Look at number 42, Jacob said. Aunt Grace isn't an admin." Richard froze. He looked at the phone. He looked at me. He looked back at the phone. "She's worth $5.4 billion, Jacob said, the words ringing out like a gunshot in a cathedral. The room didn't just go quiet. It went dead. The air was sucked out of the space. My mother stopped breathing. Tyler's wineglass paused halfway to his mouth. Connor looked like he'd been slapped. Richard stared at the screen. His face didn't change at first. It was blank, uncomprehending. Then a flush of red started to creep up his neck. This is a mistake," he stammered, pushing the phone away as if it were radioactive. "It's a glitch. Or a crypto scam. Grace, what kind of nonsense is this? Did you hack this?" He refused to look at me. He looked at the wall, at his wine, at his sons. He looked anywhere but at the daughter he had just called worthless. It's the authority paradox. When you build your entire identity on being the smartest person in the room, on being the patriarch who knows best, you can't accept evidence that contradicts that reality. To admit that I was successful, not just successful, but historically monumentally successful, would mean admitting that he was wrong. Not just wrong about me, but wrong about everything. Wrong about his values, wrong about his judgment, wrong about his entire worldview. His brain couldn't handle the cognitive dissonance. It was physically rejecting the truth to protect his fragile ego. He would rather believe the internet was broken than believe his daughter was a genius. It's actually 5.8 billion, Dad, I said. My voice was calm, cold, precision engineered. I placed my knife and fork down on the plate with a soft click. The market closed high today. Synthetic organs are valuable. It turns out people pay a lot of money to stay alive. I looked at Tyler. It's not a science fair project. It's the leading supplier of bioprinted cardiac tissue in North America. We just received FDA approval for full organ transplant trials. The company went public 3 years ago. I retained 51%. I looked at Connor. And unlike your deals in Tribeca, my revenue isn't theoretical. It's audited. I looked at Richard. So no, I don't think I'll be taking that admin job. I'm afraid I'm overqualified. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of shock anymore. It was the silence of a predator realizing it had walked into a trap. My mother started to cry. Not a gentle weeping, but a high, thin sound of distress. Grace, she said. We're family. Why didn't you tell us? Tyler cleared his throat. He leaned forward, his arrogance replaced by a hungry, desperate sheen in his eyes. 5 billion, he said, his voice cracking. Grace, that's incredible. We should talk. I mean, really talk. There are investment opportunities. I held up a hand. He stopped instantly. I didn't come here to talk about investments, Tyler. I came here to say goodbye. But since we're putting everything on the table, let's finish it. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. It was a thin blue file. I slid it across the mahogany table toward Richard. Since I operate at a certain level now, I have a due diligence team. They run background checks on anyone I associate with, even family. Richard stared at the folder. He didn't touch it. I know, Dad, I said. Know what? He whispered. I know there is no inheritance. The color drained from his face completely. It was as if I had pulled the plug on his life support. The estate is leveraged 120%, I said, reciting the facts from memory. You took out a second mortgage 3 years ago. You took out a third high-interest loan 6 months ago. The commercial holdings are in default. The bank is initiating foreclosure proceedings on this house in 30 days. I leaned forward. You didn't cut me out of the will because I'm a disappointment. You cut me out because you're bankrupt. You wanted to give the boys the business so you could hide the debt. You wanted to pretend you were still the tycoon handing down his empire. But you're handing down a corpse. Tyler and Connor looked at their father. The horror on their faces wasn't for him, it was for themselves. They were watching their future evaporate. Is that true? Connor asked, his voice shrill. Dad, is that true? Richard didn't answer. He slumped in his chair, a deflated balloon of a man. The arrogance was gone. The power was gone. All that was left was a sad old liar sitting in a cold house he didn't own. Grace, my mother sobbed, please, you can fix this. You have the money, you can save the house, we're family. I stood up, the chair scraped against the floor. I looked at them. Really looked at them. The brothers who had mocked me. The mother who had let them. The father who had tried to erase me. I'm not going to bail out the business, I said. Tyler stood up, knocking his chair over. Are you kidding me? You have billions. This is nothing to you. It's not about the money, Tyler. It's about the investment. And you are a bad investment. I turned to Jacob. He was still holding his phone, looking terrified. Jacob, I said. I looked up. I'm setting up a trust for you. For your education, college, grad school, whatever you want. It's fully funded, but it's in your name. Your father can't touch a cent of it. I handed him a business card. Call my office on Monday. They'll handle the paperwork. Then I turned back to Richard. You wanted to leave the legacy to the boys, I said. You can. The debt is all theirs. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I didn't look back. I walked down the hallway past the dusty portraits of ancestors who would have been ashamed of this night and opened the heavy front door. The night air hit me. It was freezing, but it felt good. It felt clean. I walked down the driveway to my rental car. The gravel crunched under my boots. When I reached the car, I looked back at the house one last time. I saw a figure in the window. Richard. He was watching me. He looked small. He looked like a ghost haunting his own life. The karmic mirror. Money didn't change me. I'm still the quiet girl who likes science. I'm still the person who prefers a lab coat to a ball gown. But money acted as a mirror. It reflected their greed, their shallowness, their absolute lack of character. It stripped away the facade of family values and showed them exactly who they were. I got into the car and started the engine. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I just felt free. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's building a life so big they can't touch it. If you've ever had to build your own table because they wouldn't give you a seat like this video, and share your story below, I read every single one.